Hello and welcome to the Hustle and Bustle podcast. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is being recorded, the Yugambeh people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name's Nicole Bennett and I'm an urban and regional planner, and I'm the host of this podcast. Each episode I bring you conversations with city shapers and urban thinkers, leaders in the field of urban planning and city building. I'm located here on the beautiful Gold Coast in Australia. We are one of the host cities for the Brisbane 2032 Olympics and Paralympics. The next 10 years is being described as the golden decade for our city and our region. The conversations on this podcast help us understand the opportunities and challenges ahead. So let's take a minute from our busy hustle and bustle day and let's have a great conversation. And welcome to episode 16 of 2022. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by a global thought leader, Dale Bracewell, all the way from Vancouver. Dale is a mobility thought leader, enabling transformative and resilient sustainable solutions. With over 2 decades of transportation planning and design, Dale is a professional engineer who has worked for both municipal and provincial governments and the private sector. At the City of Vancouver, Dale led the transport planning for many years, including for the Olympic Games, created their first active transportation team, and most recently led their transportation planning, including new sustainable mobility actions for the city's climate emergency plan. As a visionary strategic planner, Dale has enjoyed providing inspirational keynotes on Vancouver's sustainable mobility growth and success to cities globally. I'm so thrilled you could join me on the podcast today, Dale, all the way from Vancouver. How are you today?
Thanks, Nicole. Doing well here in Vancouver. We're in our summer months, so having the blessings of a delightful sunny summer day. And just really glad to be here. And just what a wonderful intro. Thanks so much for having me.
Not a worry, and it's very opposed to our winter here. I was just mentioning to you that we've been experiencing so much rain, and it's quite dreary. So I'm glad to hear that it's nice and sunny over there. Thank you for agreeing to be my guest. I'm so thrilled to bring you to the listeners and for me to learn more about your career and what you've been able to achieve for the City of Vancouver and with your constituents there. I recently came across your LinkedIn profile and began following you and was really inspired by your leadership within the City of Vancouver. And you've recently opened a new chapter of your career. And on LinkedIn, you posted some of the most memorable projects during your time with the city. I think it was the 21 most memorable projects. And I wanted to start this chat by asking you to reflect on those 21 most memorable projects and explain what made these projects stand out most to you.
Yeah, sure, Nicole. Yeah, I mean, it was a memory in itself, just trying to reflect back and started jotting down some notes and I got pretty close to 21, sort of representing, each year. And so they range from policy to citywide transport plans to designing a greenway and even unique ways of engaging the public. And I think what it did is like the composite. It really was like this tapestry, this representing the richness. What ultimately I felt was a good long career at the city, and then just what I was remembering was, of course, the people that I shared. And none of these I did alone, and I actually limited myself just in the LinkedIn post to maximum of 2 people that I had the good fortune of collaborating with, and then just the memories of many of them were city colleagues, but like some were health partners. We have like a park board that we work with in civic government here, like land use planners, business planning, and even engagement and communication specialists. And so it was a reminder, even a 20 plus year like myself at the city, it's actually no longer normal. Many people are, elsewhere, but we're all kind of in that, like you did your intro, city shapers and thinkers. And just really reminded me of those relationships built over time. And then lastly, I just hope that the post itself, encourages people to think sometimes, seeing a strategic plan through takes a long time. And so one of my first project memories in that post was a False Creek Crossings study, pedestrian and cycling, and It was about improving all three bridges into our downtown. And, so now 2 decades later, as I was finishing my career at the city, I can reflect back that, that strategic plan did guide us forward at the city. And I'm pleased to say, for on behalf of all those that made contributions at the city, all three bridges have either the improvements or the plans are underway to make it better for people walking and cycling.
Yeah, that's so brilliant. And I think you're right there that, strategic projects do take a long time and it's hard to sometimes see those wins. So it's nice when you can look back and see that legacy is truly there in the city. I'd like to ask what you most enjoyed about your time at the city. And really this is about sort of public service and why you found that to be such a rewarding career and stuck it out for so long.
Yeah, thanks. I think that leads nicely off the last question. And I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is, just being able to see, the transformation in our city that, I would describe as those things that actually helped improve people's quality of life. One of my first, as a young engineer, geometric designs, this was ultimately a solution for what was a traffic collision hotspot. And so just to be able to see, through the design ultimately getting built and, getting to see, that one part of our city transformed and then, moving on later in the career, larger scale projects, now then I got to move around the city and see so many more people choosing active modes from, children who very much mirrored, with my kids growing up over the last couple decades to new people cycling. And of course, as we all age, caring about those with more mobility needs and being able to see that transformation. And I think also like in public service, as I mentioned earlier, you're not doing anything alone. So, the depth and the breadth and the relationships that you get to have, both internally, but also, a good public servant needs to learn to play nice with advocates, partners, and, everything from people who attend your open houses, and then all the way up to your decision makers. And, when you're a public servant, you go through these cycles of different elected officials and how do you kind of keep steadfast in that and or different budget pressures and stops and starts. And I just found being grounded in people is really helpful as, there's a list of projects that I can remember. And one example would be health partners, because I'm just reflecting back, Nicole, like thinking, my guidance counselor that did give me good advice and said, hey, you should think, Dale, about being a civil engineer. They had no idea that I would then choose transportation as a specialty. And then, through that, then I got the good work at the city as a public servant to work with health partners. And health partners, oh, they're just so awesome to work with. And then I guess lastly, I just say, I don't know if this is the case in all cities, but at the City of Vancouver, there was an openness to, do some of your own things as long as you're, keeping up with your work plan. And I enjoyed and thanks for the comment on leadership. But I get fuel by, engaging my team and creating custom vision and mission statements. And that was the other part of my post. And, we were allowed to do offsite retreats and then create a working group and then really bring, something that would be compelling and would really fuel and drive the, the inspiration for the entire team. And so, and that's all possible, even as a public servant and in government.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that's all the good things. And it's so nice to hear that you've still got that kind of passion and joy that it brought you. I'd like to know, because I've been in public service as well, spent 6 years at City of Gold Coast. And I found it difficult to navigate that political and the community pressures. And I was wondering from your perspective in City of Vancouver, how difficult were those pressures? And how did you balance that with the desire to deliver best practice and outcome-led programs and projects? And what would be your advice to others who are navigating those political and community pressures?
Okay, well, yes, navigating is a good verb already in there. I mean, it's hard. That's clear. Like, people to know, and it's always changing. It's hard. It's always changing, but it's part of the job of being a public servant. So thinking about this ahead, I had in my career supported 5 different mayors. So that's, over 20 years, a change every 4 years. And then then our kind of top bureaucrat here in our civic government is a city manager. And so, went through 4 different city managers. So that's like one every 5 years. So that's a lot of change as you're trying to do that navigating of the political and the community. So my first piece of advice would be to, be and stay steadfast in what I hope would be a kind of common desire of your listeners is like, hey, let's make mobility better for all. Like keep that as your, your where you're going. I kind of have passion as I try and look towards improving sustainable modes, but it's that better mobility for all that is my North Star. And so I would encourage that as a piece of advice to help you get through those pressures. And so that would be one. The second would say is, keep up your confidence. We know that the work that we're doing in sustainable mobility makes a difference. It's health, it's safety, and now of course it's equity. And so keep your North Star and keep up your confidence that what you're doing actually matters. And then more specific to community, especially if a lot of your audience, Nicole, is a planning audience. I mean, planners do this all the time, but I just, reminding ourselves, like we need to embrace hearing people. We need to be really good communicators. We can't just point to our policy goals and say, hey, look, this is the goal. We got to get there. Like we have to translate that. And, my local and region, even if we had the same goal, it will still mean that if we're doing our engagement well, that navigating, it has to take on a flavor that respects back that the public has been listened to, the community has been listened to, and then that's, the challenge, but it's also the way that you navigate it then to your political and your decision makers. So, an example I would say that, to get through this is, you would have time in your career that, what you should do or what's best on best practice, but part of that navigating the community and politics means that there are times it's not that you would give up on a good solution, but you might have to put it aside for a season, and you just have to be comfortable with that. It might come back in the next political cycle. It might just be that you need to put your efforts and you'll get more fruit out of some other ways of improving sustainable mobility. And I'm a little bit of an optimist and a visionary, so that might be a little bit easier for me than some others. But I know others that have enjoyed working with me because then I can kind of be the passion for them as well. And we kind of find a way to work together towards some of those transformational solutions. So I think looking in your network of who's doing that, or you be that influencer, but again, keep your North Star, know that you're improving the life and the quality of people for their health, their safety, and now of course with equity. So that's hopefully helpful to others as well.
Oh, that's brilliant advice. I definitely can see how you'd be great to have in the corner to just keep everyone towards those goals, because it can be so hard when you sort of know where you want to head, but it just can be difficult to navigate it sometimes.
And Nicole, just maybe one more, if I could. I've learned the value of data. So I think that, a lot of those harder conversations and navigating, they can get very, not interest-based and very, political and shots kind of maybe fired. And I think as a public servant, the more you can be data-driven, bringing in the evidence, and kind of showing the progress and results in, an objective and quantitative ways. It doesn't solve, and you still have to do the navigating, but it certainly helps you and keep some of the momentum going when you have that in your ability to share that with, especially your decision makers, but even the community as well. So sorry, thanks for that one I just thought of now.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I struggle with that. And I'd just like to pick up that a little bit in terms of what if the data is not available? Like, how do you, what is sort of your tips around that in terms of gathering that data so that it is there to be able to, make some of these recommendations in an evidence-based way?
Oh, great question. I have actually two examples I could point to. So for example, we were referencing some good work in the city of Portland, which of course is just down the western coast of North America, and yet for a season our community was like, but that's not local data, Dale, or your team. And so we said, okay, but we it's all that we have right now. But then we looked in our budgets, and within the next couple of years we did our own data of Vancouver residents, very very similar. And so then, guess what? We got the same answers in terms of behavior change, and it was related to people cycling. So sometimes you got to go through a cycle to be able to then share your own data. And then the other one is working with academia partners. We've gotten some great reports done in those partnerships where academia wants to do some of that kind of before and after research. Let's say for our example, we did one before and after we did a $5 million greenway. And so that was really a win-win for both of us because they got some quantified research and we had an ability to report back to our decision makers, through someone who is really doing this ongoing in a research way. So that would just be two examples of opportunities that we had done at the City of Vancouver.
Oh, they're brilliant. Thank you for sharing those. All right, I'd like to change pace a little bit. And I know that the Olympics formed a really important part of the time that you had at the City of Vancouver. So I was keen to just get your thoughts because Brisbane and Queensland are currently preparing, in 10 years' time to host the 2032 Olympics and Paralympics. And what are those key lessons you took from your time when your city hosted the 2010 Olympics?
Sure. Yeah, lots to share. And we're actually in the possibilities of having the 2030 Olympic Winter Games return to Vancouver, and this time led by our First Nations. So stay tuned on that progress. We might be another Olympic peer city again. But going back to 2010, what we first did, and I would recommend this, is create your own host city sustainable mobility goals. So those would be based on your current local regional visions for future mobility and sustainability. And so then, from that as your foundation, launch into a couple of other things. So then we had four main goals coming out of that foundation. And the first is that you do want a successful Olympic and Paralympic Games. I mean, you're hosting the world. You have the media, you have the officials, you got the sport, of course, participants. And of course, with Paralympic, it's even, more important now to be thinking of accessibility and equity. And so that was kind of the first part of the four pillars of our plan. And the second, though, is that you want still a well-functioning urban city. So some special events have decided to scare everybody away for the period of the event, but it doesn't really respect that. And so we wanted to be and kept ourselves that we wanted to be well-functioning. Like life goes on. I remember actually one of the stakeholder meetings where I was reminded by someone from the public that said, Dale, babies are still going to be born and how do they get to the hospital? I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, there are just things that are going to go on. Not everybody participates in the games. And so as public stewards, you need to, of course, prepare again for the games, make it successful, but also, steward the functioning of your entire city and your region. Then the third is, and it's probably similar for yourself, you want to build off that sustainable foundation. And so a sustainable games. And Nicole, it's a massive opportunity. It's a massive opportunity starting with behavior change because you're going to have the opportunity to do some different things in terms of your street and your road space planning, everything from car-free spaces to I'm certain you'll grab as much transit as you possibly can and make it frequent. And you can refer to people that, hey, this is a sustainable games, but it's also the future that we're aspiring to when you read some of these plans, like you say, in the golden decade and what would be the decade after, which points to the fourth pillar, which is a lasting legacy. So really talk about the parts of the plan, and some of those would be physical. So like push as much as you can for more rapid transit, more protected bike lanes, pedestrianized streets, but also aim high for a legacy of memories. We went for countless mobility memories where people had transit nirvana, and that was augmented by delightful walking with wayfinding when they came out of the rapid transit stations. If they were choosing to bike, there was bike valet parking at all event locations. And so those couldn't sustain themselves as a physical legacy right after the games, but they certainly were the memories and the legacy that we were able to tap into for pretty much the next decade. So those are the four pillars. Then the next is, of course, partnerships. We didn't do this alone at the city. We involved all levels of government, of course, the organizing committee and all your transit providers and agencies. And then I always joke because, in land use transportation, right, we have to be really close partners always. And when it comes to the Olympics, you welcome in security because they do a lot of the decisions around what roads need to be closed. And so being close transportation partners with them is key.
Yeah.
The other is to dream big. And so you'll have Olympic sponsors, private companies, some of them, and those are opportunities. So we had the opportunity to partner with Bombardier Transportation as one of the Olympic sponsors and work with them to bring in a modern streetcar, from Europe and we called it the Olympic line. It was Vancouver's 2010 streetcar, and we moved 500,000 people in 60 days, up to 25,000 people a day. Like, this was a streetcar, Nicole, that we just brought in, or that Bombardier brought in for 60 days for the games, to just kind of daylight visualize, and people having that accessible low floor, kind of tram streetcar that we didn't have. And so that was kind of one of the things for us. And I think that's an opportunity for yourselves, and dream big. And then a little bit on the behavior change. You're going to have an opportunity to do a massive, transportation demand management campaign, and involving not only the public, your business leaders, getting them involved, to believe that sustainable transport is key, because it is. It's key to your success. And yet having your business leaders then become champions is that, and ultimately pointing to this, showcase and legacy that you'll be able to tell time and time again, a great story, that's a story that includes your residents and business as champions. So, and then lastly, because I was glad I got the metrics part in there, and maybe I was thinking about this question in advance, we did a large coalition with academia and think tanks to do before and after monitoring. So I would recommend you do that early in terms of getting that partnership. And so we can say objectively that we had 44% more people trips. We know that our sustainable mode share, it went up 18%, from 43% to 61% into at least the downtown. And then the mode share sustainability was 80% at events overall, and 90% in the heart of our urban core. And this is while vehicle traffic, because our campaign needed it, vehicles went down 30%. And so, yeah, across the screen line, we could say transit was doubled, walking was 3 times, cycling was 4 times. And then we kind of captured all that before and after monitoring into a report, and basically kept that idea of a legacy going. And we said, hey, this was our proven example. The large scale travel behavior to, and a shift to sustainable modes. It happened in an unprecedented record numbers, and then we would build off of it, for the decade after the games. So I hope that's helpful.
Did you build off it?
Yes,
Did you see that continue?
Yeah, thank you. Because we kind of after the games came up a very holistic but a greenest city action plan. Yeah. And so we updated our long-range transportation plan. It's called Transportation 2040. But in the greenest city action plan, we gave ourselves a 2020 target to get to 50% of all daily trips being walking, biking, and cycling. And so remember, it was 43%, like I mentioned before the games, and we did. Yeah, and so, awesome. and it was, and then this, I can honestly say, Nicole, that many people, we could have conversations with them, and I could say, hey, remember in the games when we had that much transit? I know you don't like cycling, but remember when we had, and we made cycling more convenient? Or you remember how we, this is where was our journey into, pedestrianizing parts of streets or more into public space came out of the games, because people remembered it, they liked it, oh yeah, I got it. It's connecting it to your rapid transit stations, which are a real people generator. Yeah, so it totally helped us achieve. In fact, we achieved that 50%. 2020 sustainable mode share goal a couple years in advance, and I attribute a lot to the legacy of the behavior and the memories of our 2010 Winter Games.
Brilliant. Oh, look, those tips are so useful, I think, and I've jotted them down because I just think, the more we can learn from previous host cities about what worked well, what maybe didn't work so well. And I think that, not scaring people away and that sort of making sure we've got a well-functioning city. And ours will be a region, because we've got sort of several host cities that will be contributing, with Brisbane being the main hub for the Olympics. But look, that's been fantastic, those key lessons that you've shared there. So thank you. I wanted to ask now a bit broader around, city transportation planning and, for other people that are contributing in that space within particularly Southeast Queensland and mainly I would say those that are within the city environment. So in the councils, the local councils and state governments and things, about what your best pieces of advice would be for them just generally on city transport planning, maybe that you haven't already captured.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd say if it's overall transport planning, I do think it still points back to, in terms of purpose, that North Star, that centering around that your mobility thoughts should always be around people, not trips, not pricing, not, and we use these language, right? Managing curbs and but even language like pro bike or anti car, like you're always in the business of people. So that would be, first at a high level, and then yeah, just don't settle for the status quo. So I've tried to use the word transformative, and I guess want to be an encourager towards, your audience, to be that influencer, or get someone that, again, you see who has this passion and can speak well about mobility, and figure out how to be friends and supporters of them. The other, I would say, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have said this, but, transport planning now is so much about spatial planning, especially when you get, to a point in time in your urban areas where, you're more constrained. And so, thinking, beyond even the complete street and that spatial planning to, that strategic network level is really important. And then, I mentioned that briefly for the games, but of course, now transport planning is so much more like, who are your public space planners? How are you going to integrate that transport spatial network plan together? And green everywhere, green trees, green trees everywhere, green infrastructure. We need way more of or way less of the asphalt and way more of the permeable, parts of our public spaces. And then don't ignore goods. I think oftentimes what I've seen is, it's either too big, right? It's the ports and it's the big trucking associations, and where cities need vibrant, functioning economies. So we need to be in the goods, and we need to engage them so that we can have conversations about right sizing and different solutions for goods for different parts of our urban environment. And I mean, whether or not this is something that is constant in terms of a high level advice, I would have liked to encourage people, try to remember, yeah, keep thinking, let's do what's right for people and like for our human flourishing, and hopefully that gets past that question of like the navigating the pressures, because it's real,
Totally.
and you do have a chance to make a difference as you champion sustainable mobility there in the Gold Coast.
Oh, awesome. They're great. And I always like to think it's do right by people and the planet. And I think the two P's, and
Mm,
we've got it
mm.
down pat. Oh, that's awesome. Look, I'd like to finish off this conversation by just hearing a little bit more about what's next for you. So I mentioned in the intro that you're embarking on a bit of a new career journey into strategic foresight. Is there anything you can share with us about what this new chapter looks like?
Yeah, no, thanks. Not exactly sure where the journey's taking me, but I can, yeah, share a little bit about why I think it's important for all of us is, you know, learn that, even in the long range plans that we've done, we're not predicting the future. So that's not what it is, but we always need to be looking ahead. And I just love this growth and stretching in towards infusing foresight into that. So, one example is scanning. I'm sure, Nicole, and I've listened to one of your podcasts too, where, you're looking at emerging trends, but I'd say foresight is just one more than that. It's looking at the trends and seeing what are those patterns, and in foresight they call them sometimes signals. And so it just helps like, hey, what's likely coming? What do I need to be ready for? And
Yeah.
then the scanning that I'm learning to do better now in foresight is, I've always been a scanner of transportation and mobility. But we all can see how, studying and scanning the future of work and our jobs and our housing, like this is scanning for transportation. That's kind of where I think foresight kind of points us to. And then the other is as we're looking ahead, you're creating those roadmaps, but making sure you're expanding your mind to the possible alternatives. Because again, we can't control, we can't make the future happen. Yet, what we can do is by looking at some alternate pathways, and also looking at kind of what might be those uncontrollable disruptions. This helps us. And it's not to kind of have a better future plan. No, it's about then with foresight, being able to kind of articulate what concrete action now through that foresight that I'm doing helps us have greater certainty about the future that we want. It doesn't change our future goals. So this whole process, to me, I'm just loving, Nicole, because it's new, and some of it's the same of what I've been doing, but I'm doubling in on it because I think infusing foresight into our sustainable ability, what it's doing is it's really allowing us with at least greater certainty, can't predict, but allowing more of that transformation and creating those strategic roadmaps. So we're probably already good, but making sure they're more resilient and going to be allowing us to adapt to, the things that we can at least try and see ahead, and those that we can't, and it's just there for us. And so, yeah, I hope that's helpful. It's not being a futurist, even though there's, a time and a place for that more creative and provocative. But I think applying foresight here in our world of mobility, it's consistent with that North Star, and just gives us a greater chance to achieve those, better, more livable and vibrant communities that we call home.
Yeah, that's fabulous, Dale, because we do some of that as well through the work of a planner, in terms of that visioning and, imagining kind of what the future could look like for a place and a community, and, doing that kind of piece of foresight and looking at different, categories. We call them the steep categories, and we kind of look ahead as to what those trends might be, and then do some backcasting about what key decisions are needed in order to get to that preferred future, that the community are sort of saying they would like. And yeah, look, I think applying that in a transportation sense makes a whole bunch of sense in my brain. So I can't wait to see where you take this next chapter and what those future projects look like, because the experience that you've had and kind of your perspective on that outlook is really, really exciting, I think. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thanks for letting me share about that new emerging passion. Appreciate that it resonates with you, at least, Nicole. Yeah, and you even know what steep is. That's good. Yeah.
I'm learning some of these things. Well, look, that's all we have time for today. So I just want to thank you again for your time. And it's been really lovely to get to know you, learn about the important work that you have done and are continuing to do. And just, all round, thank you for being a great guest.
Well, thanks, Nicole. Really appreciate the invitation and opportunity to share, and wish you all the best for that golden decade ahead.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into the Hustle and Bustle podcast this week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and a review. You can find the show on Instagram and LinkedIn too. That's all from this episode. Thanks again for listening. I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.